I had a memory that came back to me this week that is 26 years old. And the memory was I had just given birth to my firstborn, Flynn, Margaret Francis. And I ended up giving birth to her via C-section. Don't worry, this will not affect any of you who, like Livy, my daughter, who is pregnant. This is just, it was just my experience, and it's fine if it does. But I remember laying in the hospital bed, and any of you that have had abdominal surgery of any kind, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Because I was laying in the hospital bed, and this nurse, this lovely, amazing, incredible nurse, I still remember her face, came to me at, I don't know, some ungodly hour, and leaned over and said, "All right, Shannon, it's time to get up now." I literally thought she was sarcastically joking. Literally, 100%. I was like, "Oh, you jest." Like, I couldn't even cough. It all hurt, right? I was like, and then it dawned on me, "Oh, no, wait, you're serious." She was like, "Yes, I need you to get up now." And I was like, "I can't possibly do that." And she said, "I've got you. We can do this together." And she took my arm, and I mean, every step hurt, but she was with me. "I've got you. We can do this together." And we made the very long trek to the bathroom. From the hospital bed to the bathroom, it felt like a mile, but we did it. And sure enough, in no time, I was up, I was fine, it was great. But I remembered this week the way that nurse leaned in and just said, "I've got you. We'll do this together." I thought a lot about us doing that for each other in this community as we move through these next months, weeks, days, years. I spoke last week about the healing power of knowing that you do not have to do this alone. And I talked about this idea that we get to be a sanctuary for each other and for those that we do not yet know, and possibly for those we will never know. We get to be a sanctuary for each other. The great author Bell Hooks wrote, "Rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion." Rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. The word communion is from Latin, meaning to share, sharing, mutual participation, or community. Healing is an act of communion. Healing happens in community. And like I mentioned last week, spiritual community is a kind of medicine. It's a medicine for the soul. When that lovely and very tolerant nurse took my arm and helped me walk after the C-section, that was a kind of communion between the two of us. And her compassion is something that I remember to this very day. I want to acknowledge right off the bat and bring into the room and name once again the fact that many of you here in our community are feeling impacted by the chaos that has already begun post-election, the fear, anxiety, and the pain, legitimately, that so many women, Black and brown people, LGBTQIA plus people, climate and democracy advocates, and so on, are feeling right now. And what I want to share with you is that I believe this moment in our history is a bellwether moment for loving compassion. Now, if you look at the written word compassion, containing within it is the word compass. I've always loved that. Our compassion for one another will lead the way, just like a compass does, towards a life centered in love. Compassion is our compass. It will lead us forward. And right now, in the months and years to come here at NTCSL, we will have the privilege and the blessing to get to be each other's compass. when it's called for. We will get to take turns and share compassionately, helping each other to get up and move forward when the time comes. But how do we do this? How do we do this in a healthy way with people, say, in other communities that don't agree with us or that have ideological differences than we do? Therein lies the rub. Mother Teresa said, if we don't have peace, it's because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. If we don't have peace, it's because we've forgotten that we belong to each other. And sometimes this can be difficult, especially when there is so much division. It's really hard. It's like, wait a minute. You mean I belong to that person? Or those people, or that community who believe in an antithetical way that I do to the very fabric of my being and all that I believe is holy? Are you kidding me? I belong to them? Hold up. No, I belong to Darcy, and I belong to Pat, and I belong to Sandy, and I belong to Shelley, and I belong to Merritt, and I belong to Terry, and I belong to NTCSL Colorado. That's who I belong to. What do you mean I belong to them? And herein lies the spiritual path, my friends. This is the spiritual path, and I believe it's the spiritual path of awakening. So keep in mind, all of that said, I do not have to agree with anything that they, other communities, et cetera, say. I don't have to agree with that. Personally, I believe it's my moral obligation to interrupt, say, racism, sexism, homophobia, or any kind of hate speech, and know that you can do this in a loving way without creating a whole bunch of drama. You really can. I have taught here in the past, and I will bring it in again because I believe we're going to have opportunities to practice this, where what I do is I take a moment when someone says something that's offensive or harmful to another, and I just respond with, ouch. That stops it. That gives me a moment of hang time to utilize discernment and to remember that spirit is within them. And then I'm able to respond. I'm gentler if I let that ouch soften, and I can remember Spirit, God, Source is at the center of them too, whether they know it or not. I will then usually say something like, that's not okay with me, or if it's a joke, for example, that's heading down a path, I know it's going in the wrong direction, I will simply say, I need you to stop. Or if I feel that there's room for even a semblance of respectful discourse, and this includes online, by the way, I will say, I had no idea you felt that way, tell me more. But discernment there is the key. You know right away the intention. You can feel it energetically. And we can respond instead of react in a loving, spiritually mature way. At the end of the day, though, the fact remains as human beings, even in conversation with this person or having to tell them, ouch, I need you to stop. That's not okay with me. I am called to remember their divinity. And in remembering their divinity, it softens all of those edges. It really helps. It really helps. Here's the thing. It's been taught across millennia and throughout all the great faith traditions that every single one of us, you've heard me say this, every single human being has the same amount of God or Spirit or Source in them, whether they know it or not. There is not more God or more Spirit or more Source, whatever word works for you, in one person than there is in another. It just hasn't been realized. If we were to believe that there is more God or more Spirit or more Source in one person than another, it would mean that we believe in an exclusive, old-timey God who plays favorites. And that is an outdated, cruel, and incorrect interpretation of the God of my understanding, which I call love. Now, this does not, and hear me, it does not excuse hurtful, painful, or horrific at times behavior. Far from it. Justice is paramount. Any faith tradition worth its salt is dedicated to, as we are here at NTCSL, to working for social justice and to standing adamantly and strongly for the most vulnerable among us. The spiritual truth is that we are all of us, worthy of love. Everybody. So the question is, how do we love someone who is acting out, or who is hard to love, or who has hurt us, or who has voted in a way that we cannot comprehend? How do we love, and I mean authentically, love them? Maria Shriver wrote, "Everyone I have ever met who is in a place of peace and contentment has worked really hard to get there." Everyone I have ever met who is in a place of peace and contentment has worked really hard to get there. So how do we act loving towards them, maintaining our peace and contentment? My talk today is called The Spiritual Practice of Light-Filled Boundaries. And creating light-filled boundaries brings with it the peace and the contentment that Maria is talking about. This is conscious, daily, holy work, my friends. It's daily work. And what I know in my bones is that we are here, all of us here, are in spiritual community to do this work together. We are going to need to become very good friends with the boundaries we cultivate so that we can ensure our own health, peace, and well-being moving forward. And I have a couple thoughts on that. So when I talk about boundaries, I notice there's two groups, okay? The first group of folks, in general, just really have sort of a hard time of establishing boundaries or maintaining them. Anybody? This may be because they're conflict avoidant or have a hard time saying no. They may be sometimes passive-aggressive sometimes, or maybe they get a little wishy-washy. Anyone? When it comes to drawing a line. And this could be as a result from their family of origin. Or maybe it's just a skill they haven't yet mastered. It takes spiritual spine to maintain light-filled boundaries. And I don't say that as anything other than it is exactly what Maria Shriver's talking about. It's that work, it's that holy work. So we've got I will say with all the love in my heart, the wishy-washies right over here when it comes to boundaries. We're gonna have them just hang out here for a minute. They're in great company, it's fine. The second group of folks that I see when I talk about boundaries and teach this idea in general are the folks who think of a boundary as more like a solid brick wall, goes all the way up and all the way around, and they surround themselves with this brick wall. For these folks, no one here. For these folks, it can look a little bit, and I see this online, I know all of you have seen it, it can look a little bit like cancel culture, or that sort of dramatic, "You're dead to me," right? Anybody? Okay. May I be very clear? Often there is cross-pollination between these two groups, depending on the situation and the people. This group over here, let's call them the immovable bricks. We've got the wishy-washies, and we've got the immovable bricks, okay? So, neither of these choices, I must tell you, are particularly spiritual. They're also not very effective, and they really don't work in the long run. Cultivating and practicing the spiritual tool of what I call light-filled boundaries is a completely different category altogether. So let me first begin with what I mean by the word light, light-filled boundaries. So the metaphysical meaning of the word light is intelligence. The ancient phrase, to see the light, meant to come into the world, to come into full realization. So when I talk about light, I am not talking about, the airy-fairy, fluffy nonsense. I am talking about, when I talk about light from up here, I'm talking about divine intelligence, which is the highest meaning of the word light. And light, from the metaphysical spiritual perspective, means divine intelligence. That's the meaning of that. So for a moment, consider or imagine how it would feel for you if every time you created a needed boundary with someone, the boundary was not wishy-washy, and it was not made of bricks, and there were no threats of death. The boundary, rather, was filled with divine intelligence and love and compassion. That creates an entirely different energetic. So when you create a boundary for someone, created with and from the loving strength of the divine, the light of divine intelligence itself, it is a conscious spiritual decision based not on fear, but loving compassion. A light-filled boundary consciously recognizes that everyone is of the same love or God stuff or stardust. If you can allow yourself to love the part of them that is spirit, if you can allow yourself to love the part of them that is spirit, and that part of them, by the way, has never been harmed or hurt in any way, and that part of them has never harmed or hurt anyone else in any way. If you can love the divine essence, the divinity within that person, it automatically creates within the boundary itself an opening for potential healing at some point. It creates an opening for health, for wellness, for peace, for contentment within your being and within them, whether they know it or not. Many of you long-timers, and those of you who just completed my Beyond Limits class, you know a tool I use in this conversation. It helps to take a moment and imagine the person that you know you need to set a light-filled boundary with. If you can take a breath, maybe you can even do this now, and easily and gently and effortlessly imagine that person at 4 years old. Just imagine them at 4 years old, when they were completely innocent and vulnerable. This softens the edges. No person comes into this world intending to harm or hurt another human being. If you can imagine that person at 4 years old, you have activated your compassion. When I pointed out this sweet baby, what is your baby's name, if I may ask?
Freya.
Freya. Oh, Freya. When I acknowledged a 3-week-old Freya at the beginning of the welcome, you all went, oh. That's our natural compassion. So when you can, in real time, with someone who's tricky or difficult, or a group you don't agree with, whatever it may be, if you can imagine that person or them at 4 years old, Freya, at 3 weeks, there's nothing but love. There's nothing but softening in the physical body temple. This idea softens our edges and creates a bridge of compassion. That's what this does. Light-filled boundaries allow you to consciously and lovingly maintain your mental well-being while also participating and staying open to love and compassion for the divine. The ancient scripture says, love your enemies. It does not say, tolerate unacceptable behavior, become a doormat, and let your enemies or those who you strongly disagree with trample all over you. I don't recall reading that anywhere. I often call our sanctuary here, or the classrooms we spend time in, Shelley and I, our spiritual living room. And so, as a way to illustrate for you how we can, as people who profess to be inclusive, progressive, and compassionate, how do we then uphold and maintain a light-filled boundary? So, for the purposes of this piece, I invite you all to imagine, and those of you at home, the sanctuary, our spiritual living room, has become our spiritual dining room. And it's a big, beautiful table. It's lit with exquisite candles that Carolyn hand-picked from the store downstairs, I'm sure. And Mary brought in the most beautiful flowers and filled the table with all the flowers, and the light is sparkling, and there's beautiful plates and cups. And every one of you, all of you, brought a plate to share. And let's say we all sit at this beautiful, beautiful table, knowing, as we have said for decades, that we will make our table as long as it needs to be, that all are invited in this inclusive, progressive, compassionate community. And so everyone is at this table, and we are all enjoying each other, loving each other up, being curious, and experiencing this high vibration of curiosity and love, of togetherness and oneness. And then let's say maybe a third of the way into this wonderful evening, a person shows up at our doors with a crock pot, but their particular crock pot is full of mud. Here we are at our table. The person shows up with a crock pot full of mud. This is a metaphor, okay, for many situations in your life. Just stick with me. And their intention, the crock pot holder, their intention is not in any way to enjoy our company or share ideas or grow with us. Their intention, their clear intention, is to pour their crock pot of mud all over our beautiful table. How do we navigate this in this inclusive community? In this inclusive, progressive, compassionate community? They showed up at our doors. We say we welcome all people. How do we navigate that? So we could go with the wishy-washy group, and we could say, well, you're here. We welcome all people, so come in, maybe just this way, and come at the end of the table. I'll clear out these dishes. I'll try to subtly get these people out of your way, and you can make a muddy mess there, and hopefully it won't bother too many people. Anybody? Hello? That's one way. That's one way. Or we could take the immovable bricks approach, and we could immediately, upon seeing their crock pot full of mud, realizing their intention, call in the National Guard, a 5-alarm fire. They are out and far away and never to return to the kingdom. Anybody? There's that too, right? Said with much drama, by the way, at the door. Do you have a tendency yourself to fight, flight, or fawn? Where do you fall in this? And very gently, I invite you to ask yourself if you could make the brave, courageous, compassionate choice by lovingly, firmly, and clearly letting them know that we are an inclusive place where all are included. And that is said with great love. And we will not allow anyone to serve mud here. And we will love you anyway over there, where you need to go now. This, my friends, is a spiritual practice, and it can be applied to any situation. I love Brene Brown's suggestion in situations like this to have a strong back, soft front, and wild heart. This creates that needed posture for spiritual intelligence in these matters. Remember, Jesus of Nazareth turned over the tables and refused to allow mudslingers, if you will, to stay in the temple and destroy it. When someone shows up with mud in your life with a clear intention to cause harm, the light-filled boundary simply says, internally, I see you, I see the love in you, I see you at 4 or 3 weeks old. And if you can't be curious and open to what it is I have to offer, then right now, until you are able to be curious and open, I'll need you to leave. And I will be loving you while you are on your way. That is spiritual maturity. We are inclusive, progressive, and compassionate, every single one of us. And it is very important that we maintain our spiritual spine, because otherwise we can be brought to our knees by cruelty in this world. It is very important to recognize that if you lovingly say, no, thank you, I will not have that mud you are serving, you are creating a light-filled boundary with love, with care, with kindness, with compassion. And this can occur to varying degrees to all the different people in your lives. Are you following me? Just to make sure that if you notice you're over here in the wishy-washy group, you can acknowledge that and say, whoa, that is not going to serve anyone. That is only going to end badly. And if you notice, in person or online, you're over here in the immovable bricks group, you can soften your edges and remember the divinity within everyone. No person has more God in them than another. You can remember to love your enemies or those you disagree with strongly over there. And you do that by allowing yourself to remember the compassion and the love, the divine intelligence, the light at the center of your being. See them at 4 years old, take a breath. Ouch. No, I won't be having that today. I'll need you to leave, but I will absolutely continue to pray for you and love you. Do you see? And if what I just said made you go, I was fine until you said pray for them. Because I felt that in the room and online. It's a spiritual practice. If you haven't yet already done that, I promise you, to be a participant in the global peace process, peace in our lifetime, that is something that we are called to do. I pray every single day. And I got to tell you, the day after the election, I was doing my prayers, and I got to the end, and I was like, okay. And I pray for, and I named all of the people I didn't vote for, because I know that will soften my interior life. We know scientifically, it's been proven, thank you very much, Harvard, that prayer works. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it sending love, feeling the person in your heart and wishing them well, or actual prayer, whatever works for you. But right now, as people on this spiritual path, in this spiritual community, this is our holy, sacred work to do. This is how we will achieve peace in our lifetime. Peace within ourselves will allow peace on the planet. So this week, beloveds, I invite you to listen to your natural compassion and allow that to be the compass for your life. Your compassion is your compass. Second, I invite you to notice when you otherize, we all do it, otherize someone or a group of people, and on the breath, just gently remind yourself that we belong to each other. And that will create an opening that will soften the edges. And third, if there's someone in your life with a crock pot of mud at your door, take a breath. Imagine them at 4 years old. and make the compassionate, spiritual decision to lovingly and firmly let them know that you will not allow mudslinging in your presence, and you will be loving them over there until their hearts open once again. We're not here to suffer. Being New Thought in New Thought, we are here to bring light to the hurting places. That's my personal mission, bringing light to the dark and hurting places, bringing divine intelligence to the dark and hurting places. And you can find that strength within you on the breath. And you can love them. And I mean love them. Love spirit within them. The part of them that's never been harmed or hurt, the part of them that has never harmed or hurt anyone else, over there. That's okay to do. That's a light-filled boundary. A practitioner I love very much said recently to me, we get to make loving choices for our own sacred journey toward the greater good. And in doing this, we are aligning with the good of others. In creating light-filled boundaries in all of your relationships, we are making a loving choice for the greater good of all.